Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the AIInterConnect podcast. I'm your host, Laurent. And on this show, we speak with founders and executives who are building real systems across AI, FinTech, PropTech, and infrastructure, and much more. And today, I'm joined by Massimo Barone, CEO at Smartcard Marketing Systems. And Smartcard builds FinTech and payment infrastructure platforms focused on transaction ecosystem and compliance-driven solution. Simo, thanks for being here. Very happy to have you on the show.
It's my pleasure, Laurent. Thank you for inviting me.
It's great conversation upcoming, and I always love to start with your background, so listener understand the path that led you here. You clearly operate across multiple sectors, but with a core focus on payment and transaction, which is a very specific positioning. Massimo, how did your background in payment and transaction ecosystem lead you to build and lead Smartcard Marketing Systems?
Let's jump in.
Yeah.
Well, I've got about 30 plus years in developing payment systems, and that's very specific because we define ourselves more toward PayTech versus payments. And that means we focus on core technology that allows payments across all models. And, payments is agnostic. So that means payments basically goes everywhere and anywhere. And at the end of the day, any business is about making payments or collecting them and then, making it available throughout the network. So the main focus is how do you bring the technology forward, be innovative, and of course, take it to every segment, but keep it, simplified, which is sometimes the most difficult and complex part.
Yes. No, definitely. Okay, great. Then what early moment confirm this industry was the right one for you?
I came from a family business. My dad was a chef and so forth. We had restaurants with concession hotels. I left the industry. My family businesses roughly was about 22. And I went to work for the first online bank launch, the Bank of Montreal, called mBanks. There was a point where really early on, I realized that the transition to digital or even online was a wow factor. Now, what happened from there was I realized that payments was still very far from my vision, but I realized that from a technology standpoint, everything was about the data being available and how it would interact with clients. Now, when you start working at a bank from a family business, your whole corporate structure is shook.
Yeah.
Call it a life lesson, but it was a value add that I needed because I came from a very good discipline. But corporate is multi-structure within structures. And especially with a large bank, you can be siloed yet be part of something enormous. But the main factor was how to collect and move money with customers. And that was what I saw to be a great opportunity. And I left early at the bank to develop basically a payment application back in the day, which basically started my journey, today is still in my journey. And I've had the fortune of being involved in initiating multiple startups, the evolution of going to market. I've never been a reseller. I've always been a developer, model out my own payment infrastructure, bring it to market, commercialize it, work with partners around the world and let it evolve into beautiful projects, which brought me a tremendous amount of skill set and challenges because introducing new payment mechanisms, introducing models are not always welcome at the highest level. So it's a lot of groundwork, roll up your sleeves, education, which built my, war chest today.
Yeah. Voilà. Okay, I love it. Then you mentioned earlier and just right now, 5 minutes ago, that your company is a sector agnostic, but always center on transaction from start to end. And this is a very clear operational lens. When you explain smart card marketing system to someone outside fintech, how do you describe what you actually do, and who you help.
So we're right after the magic question. That's very good. From a 30,000-foot view, Smartcard, I've molded it into a platforms as a service company. And that means we have a vast investment in proprietary technology for payment applications, FinTech applications, clients, and assets today. Now, when I describe Smartcard, I basically ultimately go to, we have three core centers, and they're all payment centric. So we have cross-border and digital banking under the AxPay banner. We then have XPay World Singapore, which is our card processing host systems. And then, of course, everything focused on marketplace and digital assets and compliance, which basically is the latter part of our portfolio, which is our Generosity platform, which is a marketplace technology with soft PaaS and a wallet that connects the whole ecosystem. So when you look at Smartcard, and of course we always say we're platform as a service and PayTech architecture embedded, it means truly we can open up and service banks, enterprises, governments, or retail at every level. And because we have core technology that brings into model client-facing solutions, and you can't miss a step. You really need all that architecture to deploy a payments scheme or a card service or any payment initiative. So for the client, we're a brand as your own, meaning we white label everything, and we show the customer and educate them at the same time because it could be very complex. We've had difficulty putting Smartcard in its box because it can be very vast. We are truly to the core a one-stop shop. Over the years, we established over 105 relationships worldwide with banks, card schemes, wallets, payment rails, and the major card schemes like Visa and Masscard, and brought that all into our environment. When someone looks at Smartcard, you have this one-stop center to build and stack and deploy. So it's taken a few years to put it all together because each commercial model requires very specific focus. And then to tie it all together as one hosted solution is another venture in itself. I can say we successfully reached that pinnacle point over a year and a half ago, and now have this one engine that's taking us into the market at a very fast pace.
Wonderful, awesome. What truly differentiates your approach compared to other fintech platform providers?
That is the greatest question. I get asked this all the time.
For sure.
We
Sorry.
own everything. We made it. We own everything. Fundamentally, we don't need third parties in order to make a move. So from an institutional customer to government or to a very large project endeavor, we have the flexibility of being able to move all the parts. And each part remains in a compliant structure. So when we require a client who needs a whole new device introduced into the market, or they need to channel a new acquirer or processor or issuer, we can do it. We have the technology to certify directly or to the major card schemes. Then we have the client-facing applications that allow them to brand and put into the market already structured. Of course, clients want to customize over, but that's been our main message. The market is used to a single channel model. I've made it a mission in the last 5 years to make customers understand we're a multi-channel model that has its technology to support the deployment. So no need to go fetch vendors or work and try to patch it together. We give you the logic, we give you it all together, you customize it, and off you go to the races. That model hasn't been very welcome for a long time. A lot of closure in the industry. It's not an open industry as advertised. So you need to pick your champions, you need to work with them, and then you need to foster a relationship and hold it together while you commercially deploy, because that itself can take 2 years each with each partner. But once that's done, you have an arsenal of ready to deploy and underwrite infrastructure. And that's the narrative, right? We're ready,
Okay.
we take you to market.
Yeah, of course. Okay, very good explanation. I mean, running a platform business in payments and compliance is obviously execution heavy and highly regulated, which had real pressure at scale. Right now, what feels like the hardest part of running and scaling Smartcard?
I would believe that the best way I could state it is holding your partners in the relationship. You have to not only foster the partnership, you got to bring it together. Then you have to get them to your end mile, and then you have to deploy. So, you really hope that nothing changes on their side in that whole project. And then when you get to market with them, they're ready. And all while you have to hope that regulations and compliance and all these models structurally follow suit. So now if you times that times 10, times 20, times 50 relationships, you are really, holding a community together to execute your vision. And they need to be fundamentally supported. And that's not always the case. Some fall out of the tree, some close up shop, even the big ones. Some of them get taken over, right? So these are all the fundamentals that you have to encounter. And the worst of them all is dealing with a change of management, meaning change of vision. So, you have to keep them, in your community. You have to make them understand where your path is and then grow. But if you can sustain that and commercially deploy, then obviously, the wind is at your back and pushing you forward. And then your partners kick in because they start to bring you business, right? Sometimes you do things better than they do. Sometimes you have strengths that they don't have, because the larger the partner, the difficulty increases. So we become flexibility for them. So it's like I said, it's keeping the whole chain strong. So
Yes. No, I understand. Is it a constant, continued education for them to understand and be on top of the new things coming and changing?
absolutely, there has probably been 10, 12 pivotal changes in the last 5 years alone in payments, and in every segment. Whether it be digital banking, open banking, whether it be banking as a service, digital assets have been introduced, stablecoin for treasury, custody vaults, escrow, you name it. They're all independent issues that you need to deal with. And then the biggest problem where we deal with clients and help them is, the term globalization, right? Now, and I actually wrote an article on this last week, jurisdiction versus origination. Everyone wants to tie up the planet together and make it work, but every country has its compliance. Some countries can't work together. Other channels are not open. So you have to deal with a web of regulatory problems. And then when we talk about origination, even the major card schemes, people see the infrastructure that they have and that they're acquiring, but don't realize that core systems don't move with jurisdiction, right? They're either blocked or not available. Okay, and the client doesn't fully always understand that. Many times you need to be able to navigate on how that structure works, and that can be difficult because you have to manage that while you're managing your commercial projects. So it's a task. It's a task, and your eyes have to be open and your ears have to be paying full attention, because it's you're navigating a vast compliance structure.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's never easy. And then again, we come back to education
Yes. Yes.
of clients. Yeah,
Right.
definitely. Okay. Then from what I see across fintech and infrastructure companies, many people talk about innovation, but few talk about the transaction layers and compliance reality behind it. From your vantage point in fintech and payment infrastructure, what shift matter most right now, but it's still underappreciated.
That question has, of course, different answers based on what type of client, whether it be a bank or a government or, an enterprise. The thing about FinTech itself is, the major challenge is a financial sponsor bank for any FinTech. The major problem with a client who has a project is, again, fundamentally, is it the FinTech sponsor or is it the bank that's underwriting the structure? This problem has not gone away since the beginning of time. Many companies want to deploy, many FinTechs want to emerge, but innovation could be the caveat in many cases. Okay, because not everyone's ready for innovation. But structures work in a regulatory fashion. So it's not about money, it's about time. That's the problem. You could throw as much money as you want at a problem, but if it takes you time to become compliant, it takes time to get regulatory approvals. These are stages that you have to go through, and sometimes, or in many cases, actually, majority, innovation never meets the market because there is no sponsor who is willing to take the risk for your innovation to become actual commercialized product. Okay, so you have I was reading an article the other day. I think it was a Statista, 15 million new startups a year around the world, and over 90% of them will fail in the 5 year. Could you imagine how much innovation is lost? In all that, you know,
That's true.
startup, capacity. This is pure fact. It's the 1% rule.
Yeah.
1% will succeed, and it's not the best. It's not the best that win.
No, the numbers are tremendous.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's sick. What is widely misunderstood about transaction ecosystem today?
What is misunderstood? Basically, that you can take any transaction you want from anywhere. I think the base of the problem is old school applies. Compliance, client verification, where's the money coming from? Who's the client sending you the money? And how do you do that in under a millisecond? Okay. We want to be very fast in executing today. We want to transact at the most efficient process possible. But most enterprises don't take into fact that compliance is key and risk monitoring is a must. And that derails everything. If you don't understand how those models work with payments, again, like I said, everything gets shuffled to the back, and we help companies understand those fundamentals. And once they adopt them and understand, they realize that they're remodeling sometimes their own payment infrastructure, or their innovation has to really adapt to those particular models.
You also mentioned that your industry coverage is broad, but fundamentally anchored in payments, which suggests a platform first mindset rather than a single product mindset. How do partnerships and ecosystem reach influence your growth strategy at Smartcard?
So I learned years ago that the largest problem for customers is CapEx. So capital expenditures. Budgeting comes in waves of problems of cyclical economies that are either on the way down or coming back up, and money is not available. And then how do you work with timelines of things that change? So Smartcard's practice is invest the money, reduce the CapEx, which reduces the time, become an extremely important value add in the relationship, not just consult or advise, because those markets are on the decline, is bring the client a product that has a business intelligence and processes already baked in. Then showcase all the partners that are behind that infrastructure, that it works. And, prove to them that a commercial model can be deployed in under 60 days. That's what wins at this point. So, you know, many say that the bar to entering the market for tech companies has never been lower. I disagree. I think the bar has become much higher because you're dealing with so much compliance and regulatory matters that it's actually the cost to walk in is 10 times what it was, 5 years ago, because everything's regulated. So you're navigating sand traps, so,
Yeah.
and I work, look, on a given week, I have about 20, 22 calls for compliance with all our partners on a weekly reporting. Like it's, you know, when a company gets involved in that kind of a landscape, what happens is that your schedule gets taken by regulatory compliance monitoring, and all of a sudden you're running a compliance center.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look,
Huge job.
we become that for the customer, right? So I think that's probably the area where clients miss sometimes, and educating them is difficult because in our line of business, we always make a joke about it, and it goes for the industry, is you educate the client and then they go out looking for a system, right? Because you teach them what they didn't know they're missing, right? You know, and sometimes I always give this lesson to my teams, is like, we're not the first hire. The bigger companies will go to an IBM, they'll go to some of the larger institutions, and we'll get them a little bit more down the line when they actually need something that's very specific, because we're not building out. We have it ready. We sometimes we miss them, but sometimes we get them back.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
you know,
Okay, and do you focus more on enterprise partners or fintech innovators?
it's a mixed bag. I'd have to say, till last year, we focused in on financial sponsors. We educate them on the model we were delivering, bringing them into our ecosystems and showcasing them that clients want we're back to clients want smarter transactions, and they're willing to pay a little bit more because everything's embedded into the transaction record and how it's done. So now the other side of that is, some people want a different service structure. They may be dealing with contractual partners that are obliged. So we work with their partners and adopt them into the model. But I think the core here is the client has a platform to navigate from. And I think that's the main focus. So when a client has a canvas, it's very nice, but it's blank. They don't see or understand all the time what direction it should take or what form factor it should take. We try to remove all of that. Say, here's the best industry practices that we have. What do you need, or what do you need this to be from here? And it all correlates to payments, because it doesn't matter what you're trying to do. A majority of the time, your biggest hurdle will be, will you have a payment provider that will authorize and allow you to go forward with that structure? So full circle.
And yeah. And how do introduction and strategic relationship impact your pipeline?
I'd say we are overwhelming to the client and to the partner sometimes, because there's a full stack. They may not fully interpret our strategy properly. So we need a second date. The first date leaves them confused sometimes. And it's not for lack of marketing or strategy or messaging. It's the client. We've been told, wow, your website is and your presentations are so full of information. We just couldn't decide a direction to take. So we want that chance to say, okay, let's talk about your case, and let us turn around and prepare you a visual of what we offer in our technology, so that you can match it up with what your vision is. And when we get to that stage, our success rate capturing the client moves up to almost 80%. Obviously, closing is critical, but we know that the second date means we can present them what they're looking for. We can show them how it works and how it will work for them. And it gives us a chance to understand what partners they have and what our task is with that partner. So, and because obviously we have an abundance of case studies, we have technologies already to showcase with business processes, it's that second date that matters. And I think that's where we're at with the industry. We're in a constant curve right now, where we're teaching ISOs and VARs and distributors our model. Once they get over that overwhelming factor, they realize that we have only two service models. We have one which is driven by a virtual terminal model and access all the channels, or two is we white label the whole model in the delivery model, and they access the complete ecosystem environment to white label. So, and of course, it's all backed up by payment structure. So, most companies work with a payment orchestration or payment automation. Smartcard, we call it the 3-play. It's payment modeling first, then you move into payment orchestration, then you move into automation.
Very
Okay,
interesting.
and because we have those 3 pillars of, our cross-border and digital banking, we have our card processing hosting system, and we have our compliance model structure. We basically say, listen, this is how we cater to full 360 with all core structure, middleware, and client-facing solutions. So that all comes together now and says, okay, we understand your ecosystem, we understand the networks within them, and it's all abundantly packaged and nicely kitted inside your platforms. So tested, tried, and commercially running is key.
Wonderful. I love it. Looking ahead, 12 to 18 months, what does success realistically looks like for a smart card?
There's a few interpretations there. Right now, we have really an abundance of customers in underwriting right now. We'd like to have, majority of them, up and running by summer of 2026, and many of them in their 10 to 15% activation run rates by the end of the year, leading into 2027. For us, showcasing that we can convert an enormous pipeline is the success. Whether partners or clients or the investment community understands what does commercial or what does commercially operating mean in our business, we've built the technology, we've stacked the stack, and we're commercially executing those plans. So not everyone understands that in payments or PayTech particularly, that timeline can be 5 to 10 years. But when that time window comes, 18 months is the most critical of all, because now we're going to prove, or we're proving that we've got more than 5 commercial models running in one company. And our goal is to hit that 15% mark. And then I think
Wonderful.
what that 18-month will look like is we emerge as, top. I want to be within the top 5 to 10 ranking of leaders in platform as a service with PayTech, which I think is so far a sector that is held by a few multi-billion-dollar companies. And I think we're coming up that rank because we've locked up a lot of MSBs as clients now, card issuers. We've brought on 4 Caribbean government infrastructure deals. We have great commercial deployments going on in Singapore, Philippines, India. And I think we're being recognized now for proper execution of those commercial models. And in the top 5 business industries in payments today, Smartcard covers each industry with a proprietary solution, which is a very rare bird. Our makeup is not any major financial service structure partner. And it's Smartcard's proprietary platforms that are being commercially deployed. And I believe actually that's where we stand on what the success is. Of course, our products are in the market, but people don't recognize us by name because we brand for our client. So you'll see their name, but you may not see ours. So I think it's also, it's part of the deal.
Yeah, white label. Okay, then, yeah, given your position across fintech compliance, and where can AI realistically create efficiency versus just hype?
We've taken an approach where we've taken all our business cases, diagrams, and years of work and developed a payment masterclass. And of course, modeling out payment infrastructure and case studies and how to develop deployment models. AI is very interesting. We use it internally to develop out our content, and we use it to develop out very specific messaging. The modeling of AI, obviously, there's too many channels of possibilities to mention, but I think AI for us is a shadow of what we do, and bringing it all together into an AI-centric model, very specific to payment modeling, is what we're attempting to pull off. Now, AI has impacted us from every customer and partner and major card network in every bank, obviously taking on different directions of their own, working with them to understand what they're trying to achieve from a data lens is become another compliance infrastructure problem that we're all trying to navigate. Because AI doesn't, it does to some correlation, but PCI rules and all these different regulatory restraints are still there, which many people are not respecting currently. But that whole web is being sorted out. You have AI agents, agentic, with all these different models coming out. I think you need to make sure your team is above par in understanding how to use and embrace AI first, and then how it becomes a strategic solution to make all these tasks or interpret these tasks. And I think that's still a long way from where we need to get. Myself, AI has probably helped me become 30% more efficient, but it also has cluttered all the information, because now there's so much, and it's really trying to get to a narrow focus of what I actually need. But there's definitely a lot coming at people today with all these models, and there's more to come. I mean, I think this week alone, I saw 10 new different versions of AIs that are modeling out data in very specific ways. Financial modeling, lending, you name it, and there's just more coming. So you got to pick your apple off the tree, basically. The only way. Taking a bushel isn't going to help.
I'm sure you're doing a great job. Massimo,
Yeah.
this is great. Thank you so much for joining. Strong insight into your journey, your industry, and the work you're doing at Smartcard Marketing Systems.
Pleasure, Laurent.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the time to speak today. Thank you, Laurent.
Fantastic. Where do people can find you or your work and connect?
Well, obviously, LinkedIn is the key source today. Under my profile of Massimo Barone, or our pages, Smartcard Marketing Systems. We're across all the major social media platforms. Our website, of course, smartcardmarketingsystems.com. And of course, the old traditional method still works very well. We have toll-free numbers. They can reach us out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Massimo. That was a pleasure. We'll do it again. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And that's it. And that's it for today's episode of AIInterConnect. And if you enjoy, share it with someone who's building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you, Massimo.
Thank you, Laurent.